Beneath the gentle hush of early morning, a medieval village stirs to life beneath a sky dusted with pale clouds. In this world, clothing is far more than simple covering. It is comfort, protection, and a quiet badge of belonging. Each garment, shaped by patient hands and simple tools, tells a silent story of its owner's days and dreams. Cloth wraps each villager in thick folds or finer weaves, matching the changing moods of weather and work. Yet among all pieces, none are so quietly cherished, so taken for granted, yet so essential, as the pair of modest socks drawn over tired feet before the day begins. Every home, from stone cottage to timber hall, cares for these humble items with slow, rhythmic familiarity. They are the silent guardians of morning chores, bustling markets, and chilly evening returns, cradling feet in the plainest comfort that history can offer. For the people of the Middle Ages, socks are far from luxury. Instead, they are an everyday necessity, woven tightly into daily rituals and household routines. Children wait expectantly as mothers or older siblings help them roll cloth over small ankles before breakfast. Farmers, merchants, artisans, and elders alike treasure the warmth and relief these simple layers provide. In the soft glow of firelight, the act of pulling on socks marks the border between rest and labor, security, and the uncertainty of wandering roads. Threads of wool or linen, sometimes plain and sometimes dyed faintly with earthy colors, wrap around toes and heels, shielding skin from the cool of bare stone floors, the rough press of boots, and the persistent dampness of autumn mist. With each careful stitch made by familiar hands, socks become a trusted companion, an overlooked but essential presence, quietly underpinning comfort and well-being in centuries past. The heart of every medieval sock begins with the gathering of raw materials, a patient process shaped by each turning season. Wool, sheared from the backs of hardy sheep, arrives in armfuls of soft, springy fleece. Villagers watch as shepherds lead flocks across misty pastures, guiding them between sheltering oaks and dew-damp grass. Each tuft of wool carries the simple fragrance of open fields, wildflowers, and morning air. Before it can be twisted into thread, the wool is gently washed in cool water, drawn from wells or running streams, then spread across stones to dry in the sun. Hands accustomed to the repetition of daily chores pick through the fibers, separating the clean from the coarse, until only the finest strands remain. In smaller homes, it is not uncommon to find a spinning wheel or a simple drop spindle resting by the hearth, patiently turning raw wool into soft, workable yarn. This wool, prized for its warmth and gentle stretch, forms the foundation of countless socks in countryside cottages and bustling towns alike. Alongside wool, the slender stalks of flax plants offer their own quiet gift to medieval households. Cultivated in neat rows along garden borders or clustered near riverbanks, flax transforms from delicate blue blossoms into hardy linen thread under careful tending. After harvest, the stalks are soaked and pressed, allowing the sturdy fibers to separate from the woody core. Children and elders often gather together beneath the eaves during long summer evenings, hands busy stripping flax and twisting it into thin, strong lines of linen. Though not as warm as wool, linen brings a cool smoothness ideal for the gentle days of spring and summer. Its fresh, crisp texture feels soothing against the skin, a soft barrier against dust and heat. Whether woolen or linen, each pair of socks carries with it the memory of earth, weather, and the steady labor of many hands. Simple, essential materials that shape small comforts in every stride through medieval life. Throughout the changing seasons, the rhythm of life in a medieval village followed the pattern of the weather, whispering to everyone what clothing to choose each morning. In autumn and winter, when icy winds crept along the lanes and the fog settled heavy over the rooftops, thick wool socks became a necessary shield. The villagers slipped woolen socks over their feet before braving the cold dawn outside, the rough, cozy fibers hugging ankles and toes in comforting warmth. Farmers on frost-touched fields, children on the way to lessons, and artisans in their quiet workshops all felt grateful for the gentle barrier that kept the sting of winter's chill at bay. Inside homes warmed by the glow of hearths, pairs of wool socks dried near the fire after long, damp days. Each strand of wool soaked in the memory of gray skies and the simple happiness of returning home, making the weight of winter just a little lighter and softer for all who wore them. Spring brought milder breezes and longer days, and with them, the comfort of lighter linen found its place. When morning sunlight stretched over blooming gardens and the air was laced with the scent of new grass, villagers would choose socks made from smooth, cool linen. These were thinner, easily washed, and quick to dry, perfect for afternoons in fields spotted with wildflowers or market days buzzing with quiet conversations. Linen socks offered gentle relief on warm, sunlit afternoons, protecting feet from the grit of dust without causing them to overheat. As seasons changed, so did the textures that met the soles of each villager's feet, a steady cycle of soft transitions echoing the natural world outside. In every home, families tucked away wool socks as spring arrived, only to bring them out again when the air turned sharp once more. Through these small acts, the weather's influence wove itself into daily choices, guiding hands toward the fabric best suited to nurture comfort in a world alive to the touch of every season. In a quiet corner of a medieval home, the rhythm of creation often began with the gentle spin of a spindle or the steady turn of a spinning wheel. Wool was carefully drawn and twisted into yarn, its softness gathering over fingers practiced by many evenings of work. Once enough yarn or linen thread was prepared, the next step was the weaving or knitting of socks. In the earliest centuries, most socks were made by weaving strips of cloth that were then cut and sewn into shape with careful stitches. A skilled hand would wrap the fabric around a foot to measure, then mark, cut, and finally piece together the sock with a needle and thread. Seam after seam, the shape of a foot slowly appeared, a simple pattern forming a snug silhouette. Each stitch was close and strong, built for daily wear and for surviving the walks along muddy paths and uneven forest trails. As time passed and techniques grew more refined, knitting with 2 straight sticks or fine bone needles became more common among those who could afford or learn the skill. Rows of loops formed a smooth-fitted tube, yielding a sock that hugged each curve from ankle to toe. The process was never hurried. Socks often required days of patient work, especially during the long nights of winter, when the chores outside were few, and families gathered close to the fire. Often several generations would share the task, an older relative spinning the thread, younger hands practicing stitches, and a mother or father carefully shaping the finished piece. Sometimes, villagers would decorate the cuffs with a simple line of colored yarn or a tiny stitched pattern, not for show, but as a quiet mark of care or family pride. Tools were simple: wooden spindles, bone needles, a sharp knife for cutting, and a length of braided wool to measure the right fit. Every finished sock was as unique as the person for whom it was made, touched by the hands that crafted it, and the small, familiar rituals of daily medieval life. Bit by bit, these techniques handed down through generations became a quiet legacy, one humble sock at a time. With the first light of dawn, a farmer's day began even as frost clung to the earth outside. Inside the dim cottage, wool socks offered a gentle comfort against the chill that seeped in through stone floors and shuttered windows. Pulling on a thick, hand-stitched pair was as much a part of the morning routine as breaking bread or tending the fire. The socks wrapped the farmer's feet in warmth, making the first steps of the day less sharp and more bearable. Whether hauling buckets, splitting logs, or guiding animals from their pens, each movement was cushioned by the soft, enduring fabric around his ankles and toes. On frozen fields where the ground crunched under heavy boots, those simple socks provided a necessary barrier, holding off the sting of winter and keeping numbness at bay. The snugness and warmth became a quiet source of strength, carrying him from shadowy, snow-lit mornings to the golden hush of dusk. Throughout long hours in the open air, the socks continued to serve with silent loyalty. When cold rain fell, or winds picked up, soaking through coat and trouser, the wool held its warmth close, even when damp. During rare breaks, the farmer would pause in the shelter of a hedgerow, pull off his boots, and check the fabric, sometimes wringing out the moisture, always grateful for the simple protection it gave. At day's end, the return home brought another small comfort, hanging the socks near the hearth to dry by the gentle heat of the fire, watching as steam curled from the damp wool. Each evening, as the world grew quiet and the family gathered, the farmer's tired feet rested inside fresh, warming socks once again. In this simple ritual, the humble sock became more than a piece of clothing. It was a faithful companion, supporting the rhythm of rural life through the coldest, hardest months of the year. In a workshop warmed by the soft glow of morning, a weaver sat quietly at his wooden loom, his hands moving with steady patience. The room was filled with the gentle sound of the shuttle sliding back and forth, a rhythm older than memory. Sunlight crept through a small window, painting stripes of gold across baskets of wool yarn stacked neatly on the shelves. As he worked, the weaver listened to the soft songs of sparrows outside and the low hum of daily village life, letting his mind wander as his fingers guided each thread into place. Around him, finished pieces, scarves, tunics, and above all, socks, rested in careful piles, each one a mix of necessity and simple beauty. When he paused to select a new skein of dyed wool, he ran his thumb gently across its fibers, noticing the slight oils and the earthy scent, reminders of the hillside sheep who provided it. Every motion in the workshop felt part of a slow, ancient dance, shaped by learning, passed quietly from parent to child. Throughout the day, the weaver watched as the material on the loom slowly transformed from rough strands into something softer and more comforting. Sometimes, a customer would appear at the door, politely waiting for the craftsman's attention, asking for a particular size or color, but most hours unfolded in solitary calm, filled with purposeful repetition and gentle pride. The weaver would often glance at the foot-shaped forms on his workbench, using them as guides to shape every new sock for the perfect fit, whether for a farmer's broad steps, a child's quick feet, or an elder's careful pace. As dusk approached and the light softened, he would lay his tools aside, brush stray bits of wool from his lap, and quietly admire the day's steady work. The socks and cloth woven in this small, peaceful space would soon warm the feet and bodies of villagers throughout the season, each one carrying a little piece of the weaver's calm patience into the busy story of medieval life. In the heart of every medieval home or workshop, the natural threads used for socks offered their own simple poetry. When a fresh skein of wool was unwound, it greeted the hands with a gentle, springy texture, soft yet sturdy, with tiny waves running through each fiber. Wool thread often felt pleasantly rough between the fingers, slightly oily from the lanolin that helped protect sheep from rain and wind. Spinners and weavers would sometimes close their eyes for a moment, rubbing a bit of the yarn between their palms, feeling both the softness and the honest rustic texture that promised warmth. Even newly spun linen thread, taken from the inner stalks of flax, held a different kind of grace. It was cool and smooth to the touch, gliding easily across hardworking hands, thin and almost silky, though woven tightly for strength. As the skeins tumbled from baskets or waited in tidy loops beside the loom, the air held the gentle weight of their presence, a comfort both tactile and visual, blending nature's patience with human care. The scents surrounding these threads carried the memory of field and farm, connecting the craft to the outside world. Wool brought a quiet echo of pasture, fresh grass, clean rains, a mild, earthy scent that lingered long after the fleece was washed and dried in the sun. Hints of wildflowers or even the faint trace of wood smoke would sometimes cling to the fibers, weaving small stories into the work. Linen, too, had its own tender aroma after soaking, drying, and spinning, smelling faintly of cool streams and cut greenery. In the weaving room, these natural fragrances mingled with the wooden scent of the loom, the beeswax used to smooth thread, and the faint must of stored fibers. Together, they created a calming atmosphere, humble yet rich, where every breath reminded the maker of the origin and purity of each sock's material. In such surroundings, working with thread became more than labor. It was an act of gentle connection to the land, the animals, and to hands that shaped comfort from raw, living things. The colors of medieval socks were a quiet reflection of the world that surrounded the people who wore them. Most often, socks appeared in gentle, earthy shades, shaped by what could be gathered from the fields, forests, and gardens nearby. Deep, natural wool colors, creamy ivory, soft gray, and warm brown, were left untouched in their simplicity. When villagers sought to brighten their wardrobe, they turned to natural pigments gathered with patient hands. Onion skins and walnut shells yielded golden yellows and soft browns, while stalks of woad or indigo brought dusky blues that echoed the evening sky. Marigold petals and madder root, boiled and steeped, produced gentle oranges and calm reds, a palette never loud but full of quiet purpose. The process of dyeing was slow, requiring hours of careful stirring and watching, as socks or balls of yarn soaked in clay or wooden vats, drawing in the color of the season. These natural hues were more than simple decoration. They spoke to the rhythms of work, ritual, and the pace of medieval life. Wealthier families might request socks in softer shades of blue or green, a slight luxury made possible by sourcing rarer or costlier dye materials. For most people, however, color choices depended entirely on what was blooming, ripening, or ready for harvest in any given month. A child's new pair of socks might share the honey yellow of wildflowers in spring, while an elder's winter pair would show quiet grays, undyed and waiting for practical use. Occasionally, many villagers would gather to dye wool together, pooling their harvests of roots, skins, and berries in a communal pot, letting the colors mingle and settle through shared effort. The result was always unique, never identical, always shaped by the land, the season, and the hands that turned simple materials into peaceful, wearable comfort. In every thread of colored fabric, the story of nature's patience and the community's care found a subtle, enduring place. For children in medieval villages, a pair of socks meant far more than just another piece of clothing. Each morning, the soft call of a parent would bring little ones tumbling from narrow straw beds. Before the morning bread was sliced or lessons begun, there came the familiar ritual of pulling on wool or linen socks. Mothers and older siblings helped with this gentle task, rolling the simple, handmade socks over small feet and round ankles. The sensation was soothing and warm, the first comfort against a cool floor or the unexpected chill of early dawn. Well-fitted socks protected tiny toes from the gritty dust that crept indoors each night, the rough edges of wooden floorboards, and sudden drafts slipping through stone walls. For young children, these humble garments quietly wrapped them in care, promising both a softer start and a little extra shelter from the hiccups of the day ahead. As the day stretched on, socks became faithful companions both at school and home. In village classrooms, where rough benches and uneven tiles chilled the air, socks helped children focus on their lessons rather than the cold beneath their feet. The rhythm of reciting prayers or practicing writing was easier while feet stayed warm and comfortable. Later, as games tumbled out into muddy yards or over frosty patches near the garden fence, socks cushioned each hop, skip, or stumble. Even at home, with siblings crafting toys, mending chores, or curling up near the hearth, the soft fabric guarded against accidental spills or stray embers. At night, when the world fell quiet again and young bodies curled up in blankets, slightly worn socks offered one last, gentle assurance that warmth and protection waited, even in sleep, woven by the careful hands and caring hearts of family. In simple, sturdy socks, children found not just comfort, but the quiet security of knowing they were watched over, step by gentle step. On the winding roads that meandered through fields, forests, and villages, travel in the Middle Ages was rarely swift and seldom easy on unprotected feet. Every stone, puddle, and uneven patch of earth pressed its mark upon the traveler. Yet even amid the slow, steady tread of many miles, a simple pair of socks made all the difference. Drawn carefully over bare skin, wool or linen socks formed the first soft layer under sturdy shoes or well-worn boots. They cushioned each heel strike against hard ground, massaging away some of the day's fatigue, and protected toes from the coarse rub of leather. As the day wore on and steps multiplied, socks absorbed moisture from sweat or sudden rain, keeping feet from chafing and blisters as much as simple medieval clothing allowed. For merchants heading to distant markets, pilgrims walking toward holy shrines, or farmers leading carts along muddy tracks, the humble sock became a quiet companion, absorbing the aches and roughness of each journey. As daylight faded and travelers rested beneath hedgerows or in the warmth of an inn, the true comfort of socks became clear. After hours of journeying, they were gently peeled away, revealing feet that had been spared the worst of the road's hardships. Tired travelers would often shake out their socks, noticing the dust and grit caught in their fibers, the invisible shield that had kept skin from harm. Sometimes socks would be hung near a small fire or draped over a sunny rock to dry for the next day's walk, keeping their shape and softness ready for new distance. This simple act was more than care for a piece of clothing. It was gratitude for the hidden comfort that made hard travel a little gentler. For those who journeyed beneath wide skies and shifting weather, socks meant more than mere warmth. They were a quiet promise of resilience, nurturing every step taken over ancient, well-worn roads. In the gentle bustle of a medieval village, commerce moved at a slow and friendly pace, shaped by the steady rhythm of routine. Market day was always a time of quiet excitement as villagers gathered around wooden stalls set up in the central square. Among fresh bread, woven baskets, and tiny pots of honey, there were always a few tables displaying simple socks, some folded in neat piles, others hung in loops from makeshift racks. Local weavers and spinners watched with patient pride, offering their work to neighbors and newfound friends alike. The air was filled with the mingled scent of earth and wool, sunlight glinting off rows of dyed fibers, each pair of socks a small but important treasure. Buyers would turn socks over in their hands, marveling at the softness of well-spun wool or admiring the faint green of socks dyed with nettles from the riverbank. Gentle conversations flowed about prices, colors, and the best way to dry wool by the fire, details woven into the everyday music of village life. The exchange of socks at the market was never rushed, and it often carried a spirit of trust and quiet gratitude. Children would watch the whole process, eyes curious and eager, while their elders traced the fine stitching or offered quiet praise for sturdy craftsmanship. A pair of socks might be traded for a loaf of dark bread, a wedge of cheese, or a handful of late apples, forging small bonds between households and friends. Sometimes, coins changed hands, but often, barter and shared stories held more value. In this way, socks traveled from spinner to wearer, bringing warmth to new homes and feet. When the market day faded and the sun dipped behind cottages, the leftover pairs were carefully gathered, ready to be sold another day or gifted to a neighbor in need. In the slow, peaceful commerce of these villages, socks were more than simple clothing. They were a sign of care, a symbol of the gentle connections that shaped the fabric of medieval community. Morning arrived softly in a medieval home, filtered through small windows and landing in gentle pools on worn wooden floors. The first stirrings of family life came not with chaos, but a peaceful, familiar rhythm. A kettle hung over the fire, sending ribbons of warmth through the air as sleepy voices greeted the day. The ritual of putting on socks was part of this quiet awakening. Each pair, set aside on a stone ledge near the hearth the night before, was warmed just enough to chase away the coolness lingering from the shadows. Parents would help the youngest children, rolling rough wool or smooth linen over tiny, wiggling feet. Older siblings found their own pairs, stretching them carefully to soften them before slipping them on. Each motion was unhurried. The act held a reassuring pattern, a gentle start that bridged the calm of sleep with the promise of daily chores. The soft shuffle of feet across the floor mixed with low, contented laughter. Bent over in the firelit room, family members shared stories and kindness in those few, slow moments. Even the oldest in the house, with hands lined by years and work, took comfort in the simple pleasure of pulling on a well-made sock. This ritual was less about mere necessity and more about togetherness, a quiet reminder that while much lay ahead, each new day began side by side. With socks snug against ankles and toes, the household gathered for a small breakfast, spirits lifted by warmth and routine. Outside, the world was waiting. Fields, markets, workshops, lessons, but inside, the day always started wrapped in softness and care. The simple morning act of dressing one's feet became a cherished tradition, steadying every step that followed through the long, medieval daylight. In the peaceful rhythm of medieval life, even something as humble as a sock could quietly reflect the distance between commoners and nobility. For the majority of villagers, farmers, artisans, and children, socks were made mostly of sturdy, locally spun wool or sometimes coarser linen. These were simple and practical, dyed in gentle shades of browns, grays, or soft greens, using common roots or plants from nearby fields and forests. The design favored usefulness, thick enough to cushion feet during long days in muddy fields or cold stone homes, tough enough to resist frequent mending around toes and heels. Sometimes, a careful bit of colorful thread or a faint stripe would be added by a loving hand, but decoration remained modest. Each pair was handmade, often passed down, or repaired, until even the smallest piece had a story to tell. To the common folk, a good sock offered silent but vital protection, a companion to every step in labor and living. Noble families, meanwhile, enjoyed socks that spoke more of luxury and social standing than necessity. For them, linen was finer and softer, sometimes even mixed with imported silk or rare threads, resulting in a smoother fit and greater comfort. Colors for noble socks could be brighter, rich reds, deep blues, and rare purples, since costly pigments, like indigo or imported cochineal, were reserved for wealthier households. The socks themselves were often longer, rising above the ankle or even up to the knee to fit fashionably beneath elegant hose or flowing robes. Artisans might add delicate embroidery, gold-threaded trims, or intricate patterns to please a noble's eye. Even the act of putting on such socks became a small ritual, often assisted by a servant and accompanied by gentle conversation or laughter. While villagers' socks bore signs of daily toil, noble socks remained a mark of refinement, a subtle but ever-present sign of comfort, beauty, and connection to the world of privilege. Yet, whether simple or ornate, every sock carried its own quiet warmth, touching the lives of those who wore them, each in their own gentle way. As each season turned, families in medieval villages adapted their clothing to the quiet rhythms of nature. In the chill of winter, coarse wool socks became a precious shield against the icy wind and frost that pressed close on stone walls and muddy paths. Mothers dug into storage chests for the thickest pairs, handing them out to children and elders who wrapped up before venturing outside. Farmers and laborers relied on double layers of sturdy wool, occasionally reinforced with patches or woven linings for extra warmth. Inside, the simple act of drying wet socks beside the hearth became part of the daily routine. As spring approached, lighter pairs, often a blend of finer linen and wool, slowly replaced the thickest winter socks. The arrival of gentle breezes and longer daylight hours brought a sense of relief, and people stored away the warmest socks, neatly folded and ready for colder days to return. For villagers, socks were practical and often handed down, cycling with the turning of the year in careful, seasonal patterns. In noble households, the changes of season brought more than just comfort. They brought style and display. With greater resources and access to materials, wealthy families commissioned socks for each part of the year. Summer demanded fine linen or even silk, dyed in brighter hues and designed to be both cool and elegant, a quiet nod to status and refinement. During autumn and winter, nobles wore richly colored wool socks lined with softer threads, sometimes perfumed with dried herbs from the estate gardens. Seasonal feasts or formal gatherings called for new pairs, often adorned with embroidery or gold thread. The cycle of seasons was reflected in the changing accessories, with servants tasked to arrange socks according to weather, occasion, and mood. Still, whether in humble thatched homes or high stone manors, everyone welcomed the return of favorite pairs with each new season, a gentle continuity that carried warmth, memory, and quiet expectation through the gentle turning of the medieval year. In the quiet routine of medieval homes, caring for socks was an act treated with patience and respect. Every evening, as the day's work faded and firelight danced on stone walls, families gathered their socks from damp boots and chilly floors. Even the youngest members knew to set their pairs side by side near the hearth, letting the gentle warmth dry them without the risk of burning or shrinking. Threads of wool or linen, once spun so carefully, could wear thin and fray if left too long in cold or muddy corners. Mothers and elders were quick to notice a loose seam or a small hole, problems best mended early before they grew. Simple needles and brightly colored mending yarns were kept in wooden boxes, ready to restore each sock to comfort. Little hands sometimes learned the art of darning, weaving tiny bridges across worn heels in slow, steady passes. Through these acts of care, socks endured the demands of country roads, crowded markets, and every step between. This careful maintenance turns socks into objects of familiarity and even pride, passed down or shared among siblings and neighbors. The tradition of mending was not only practical, but woven into the very rhythm of family life. On long winter nights, repairs became a shared activity. Stories passed between generations as fingers slipped yarn through fabric, laughter and quiet advice blending into the soft sounds of home. Even in noble homes, skilled seamstresses spent hours maintaining the elegance of ornate stockings, stitching fine silk or linen with precision. In all homes, to prolong the life of a good sock was to honor the work of the spinner, the weaver, and the giver. Each pair that survived another season was a small triumph, proof of care, and a testament to resourcefulness. In this simple, patient way, medieval families drew warmth not only from the socks themselves, but also from the gentle rituals that kept them whole and ready for the day ahead. The medieval fair unfolded under a soft morning sky, its gentle bustle filling the village square with the calm music of daily life. Stalls shaded by linen awnings lined the streets, each offering goods to curious visitors arriving from neighboring hamlets. Near one end of the square, a table was covered with rows of socks, some rolled tightly, others laid out flat to catch the interest of passing families. The wool socks displayed in hand-woven baskets showed faded stripes or fresh colors dyed from local herbs and flowers. Sellers greeted customers with open smiles and easy conversation, inviting them to touch the yarn and see the careful stitching for themselves. The air was full of friendly voices, the sound of coin gently placed on rough wooden countertops, and the steady rhythm of footsteps passing between stands. Sunlight played on the faces of young children picking out new socks, delighting in the promise of extra warmth for the cold months ahead. Buyers took their time, holding socks up to the light to check the quality or comparing the softness of different pairs. Some discussed trades, offering wedges of cheese, woven cloth, or bunches of dried herbs in exchange for a special pair of socks. Others inquired about dyes, wondering how a batch of walnut shells turned the wool to brown, or which flowers made such a yellow thread. Friends met and lingered, sharing laughter over old stories as socks changed hands, a simple but thoughtful gift. When a sale was made, socks were folded and wrapped with a loop of twine, then tucked into baskets or beneath cloaks for the walk home. As the sun slipped toward noon and shadows grew long, the pace of the fair stayed unhurried and kind. In this simple scene of exchange, socks became more than just small comforts. They were a link in the quiet web of community, carrying both warmth and the memory of peaceful days spent together in the heart of village life. In the gentle routine of medieval life, the act of giving a pair of socks stood out as a gesture both simple and deeply meaningful. When chilly winds swept through the village, or celebrations marked a special occasion, socks quickly became a treasured gift among friends and family. Each pair carried the memory of careful hands, a mother spinning and knitting during quiet hours, a friend choosing just the right shade of wool, or a grandparent weaving history into every loop and seam. Socks were wrapped in bits of cloth or tied with plain string, their value not measured in gold but in the comfort they brought to tired feet and the kindness they represented. The giver might offer them with a gentle smile and a few soft words, and the receiver would feel both warmth and gratitude in equal measure, knowing that someone cared enough to provide such a thoughtful and useful token. These gifts often marked both milestone events and small, everyday kindnesses. On chilly birthdays or feast days, a new pair of socks awaited at the foot of the bed or under a favorite chair, a quiet reminder that one was remembered and cherished. A brother preparing for a long journey on dusty roads would carry socks made by his sister, meant to keep blisters at bay and serve as a memory of home. Elders passed down socks crafted in their youth, the stitches worn but strong, each repair marking a year or a story. Children might exchange clumsy, first attempts at knitting with pride, their uneven stitches representing the start of family tradition. In these peaceful villages, the gift of socks was never grand or flashy, yet it held a rare kind of worth, a blend of utility, affection, and the small blessings of daily life. Every pair was a quiet promise, carrying the warmth of giving hands and the gentle hope that every step, near or far, would be just a little softer. On cold mornings, when frost traced delicate patterns on window glass and the world outside seemed hushed, the simple act of slipping into hand-knit socks brought a gentle comfort that was both immediate and lasting. The wool, shaped by loving hands, held onto the warmth of the hearth and the softness of many nights spent in quiet labor. Each toe slipped in, welcomed by gentle fibers that hugged the skin without pressing too tight, immediately offering a shield from the chill that crept across bare floors. As the sock settled into place, its careful stitches, sometimes a little uneven, but always sturdy, formed a cozy barrier, inviting the wearer to savor the contrast between warmth within and winter's bite without. This moment, small and often unnoticed, was a quiet pleasure repeated over countless days, a reminder that care and intention could be woven into something as simple as daily comfort. Throughout those cold days, the feeling of handmade socks lingered, a gentle presence that grounded every step. Whether working outside, walking to market, or resting near the evening fire, the socks remained close and steady, their texture a constant against shifting weather and changing light. Each footfall on dusty tiles or packed earth was softened by the familiar embrace, a quiet assurance that someone's time and affection lingered there. The memory of spinning, dyeing, and knitting added an invisible layer of comfort, blending the warmth of wool with the warmth of community. In a world often ruled by necessity, these simple blessings stood out all the more. A soft, patient reminder that care could be carried along every road, that solace could be found not in grand gestures, but in the smallest routines. With each cold morning and every dusk, pulling on those handmade socks meant welcoming both warmth and the gentle, peaceful feeling of being truly at home. In medieval villages, the church and its customs quietly shaped every corner of daily life, including the smallest details of clothing. Socks, like other garments, sometimes reflected religious tradition in their colors and timing of use. For special holy days or important festivals, people chose socks in shades that held meaning within the church. Soft whites for purity, deep blues or purples during solemn seasons, and even plain, uncolored wool during times of fasting or reflection. Priests and members of religious orders wore socks made from fine linen or wool, always well cared for and free from showy dyes, in keeping with vows of humility and simplicity. In wealthier circles, the faithful might gift socks of deep blue or even crimson to a priest in recognition of a church celebration, marking the day as sacred in both spirit and appearance. Beyond color, the use of socks often followed the slow beat of the church calendar. Many villagers put aside their finest socks for Easter or Christmas, saving little touches of embroidery or a favorite dyed pair for the sanctuary's warmth. In monasteries, the act of mending or washing socks was carried out with the same patience and quiet reverence found in prayer, a form of service, humble and heartfelt. During processions, festival masses, or gatherings, families prepared their best clothing, paying close attention to the modesty and cleanliness of their feet as a mark of respect for the sacred. Even in these small acts, a sense of connection to faith lingered, reminding everyone, young and old, that comfort and care, woven together in each sock, were meant as much for the soul as for the body. Through the changing seasons and the circle of holy days, religious custom brought an added meaning and a quiet dignity to the fabric of everyday life. Inside a peaceful workshop, a craftsman worked with practiced patience, his hands moving steadily between skeins of yarn and jars of color. Each morning began with the simple pleasure of choosing the day's threads. Some were wool, washed and spun from local flocks. Others, thin linen brought in neatly bundled from distant fields. Beside his bench, clay pots held powders and liquids made from leaves, roots, berries, and even bits of bark collected across many seasons. The craftsman would dip his hands into dye, careful to swirl the yarn smoothly, sometimes testing a single strand before committing the whole bunch. He watched as colors changed with the light, and as heat from the stove coaxed hidden hues from every natural pigment. If a shade was too faint, he would add more roots or petals, stirring gently, waiting for the magic moment when one color gave way to another, closer to the vision in his mind. Patience was as much a tool as needle or spindle. No two batches were ever the same, and the search for the perfect blue-green or a gentle sunset purple sometimes took days of quiet, focused labor. When he was satisfied, the craftsman would rinse the yarn in cool water, wringing each skein carefully, and then laying it across wooden racks to dry in the soft sunlight. While he waited, he arranged his tools and considered new recipes, inspired by the world outside his window. A field washed in golden afternoon, a cluster of wildflowers by the stream, or the way the village rooftops glowed at dusk. As the colored threads dried, they took on warmth and character, ready to be woven into socks for friends, neighbors, or for the next fair. In this workshop, each color told a story, not only of plants and seasons, but of patient craft and a heart attuned to the slow, gentle artistry of life. In the softly lit chambers of a noble home, socks were more than mere protection. They were miniature works of art, carefully adorned with details meant to please both eye and heart. On a quiet afternoon, an artisan might sit beside a window, needle in hand, selecting colored threads of silk or finely spun wool. Some threads shimmered gold or silver in the changing light, while others spoke with subtle, elegant hues of crimson, blue, or emerald green. The embroidery began at the cuff, tracing gentle vines, tiny blossoms, or delicate symbols treasured by the family, each design chosen with care and meaning. Sometimes, initials or a family crest were stitched in tight, tidy curves, nearly hidden from a casual glance but proudly revealed in the right company. Every stitch carried a sense of quiet pride, the work of fingers schooled by years of patient practice, each movement slow and certain. Beyond the embroidery, small finishing touches showed the artisan's devotion. Edges were trimmed with fine, decorative braids or rows of looped thread, designed not only for beauty, but to ensure the socks lasted through many wears. Velvet ribbon might be threaded through the top, gathered and tied into a neat bow, or tiny pearls sewn along the seam as a mark of luxury. These touches were never gaudy or overwhelming. Instead, they whispered of refinement and quiet wealth, pleasing to those who valued subtle beauty. As a nobleman or lady pulled on such socks before a grand occasion, their feet were wrapped in comfort as well as esteem, a tender reminder that in even the smallest details, care and artistry could transform something humble into a treasured possession. Over time, these socks became keepsakes, sometimes set aside in special boxes or handed down through the family, carrying with them stories of celebration, affection, and the gentle touch of skilled hands. In the heart of every medieval village, the making and selling of socks echoed the gentle flow of the local economy, unhurried and rooted in respect for the land. Most materials that shaped the socks, wool from village sheep, linen from fields of flax, were grown, gathered, and spun close to home. The rhythm of nature set the pace, with harvests and shearing taking place only when the seasons allowed. Families planned sock making around the quieter months, during long winters or rainy afternoons, working together by candlelight. Every scrap of yarn was valued, with even the smallest bit saved for future mending or blending. The community understood how precious these resources were, and nothing went to waste. For the villagers, every step in the process, from grazing sheep on open meadows to dyeing yarn with local plants, was colored by an awareness of their surroundings, weaving environmental care into daily life. On market days, the slow pace of trade allowed buyers and sellers to connect, share stories, and build trust. Sock weavers offered their products in measured amounts, never more than what the land or village could sustain. In good years, when sheep grew thick coats and flax fields bloomed wide, surplus socks brought a little extra coin or goods to each household. In leaner seasons, families traded or gifted socks to help neighbors in need, strengthening the invisible threads that bound their community together. Markets were more than places of commerce. They were where lessons about stewardship, gratitude, and mutual support took quiet root. Selling socks was not about gaining wealth, but about exchanging the gifts of careful labor and the bounty of the land. In this way, the local economy moved softly and thoughtfully, mirroring the slow, enduring patience that turned simple wool and flax into the cherished warmth of a new pair of socks. A gentle rain began before dawn, drumming quietly on the thatched rooftops and pooling in the muddy lanes of the village. The air was cool and damp, and heavy gray clouds hung low over the twisting chimney smoke. In every cottage, families prepared for the day with a slower, softer rhythm. Morning light barely crept across stone floors as people reached for thick woolen socks set near the hearth overnight. The busy noises of the outside world, distant carts squeaking and geese shuffling across puddles, were softened by the steady patter of rain on wood and earth. Children wriggled their toes inside warm socks, while adults pulled on sturdy boots, each movement purposeful and calm. Even the family dog took shelter near the door, curling close to the warmth of feet, wrapped in rough, comforting wool. The socks shielded skin from chilly stone and wet straw, turning the simple act of dressing for rain into a daily pleasure. Outside, the village glistened beneath a veil of rain, every surface shining with a gentle silver. Those whose work called them out, farmers tending animals or villagers heading to the market, stepped into the damp with slowed, careful steps. Thick socks, hidden inside worn leather shoes or boots, made each journey less harsh. Warmth and dryness followed every step despite the drizzle. There was a pleasant heaviness to the air, filled with the smells of wet earth and wood smoke, a mingling that spoke of comfort even in the rain. Travelers paused under wide eaves or tree branches, shaking droplets from cloaks but not from spirits, knowing their feet would stay safe and warm until they returned home. Inside, spare pairs dried over the fire and little ones played quiet games, grateful for the gentle security that came from something as simple as thick socks. In the quiet of a rainy morning, all across the village, peace and comfort walked hand in hand, keeping the cold and damp at bay. In a quiet corner of her cottage, an elderly woman sat by the soft glow of a morning fire, her movements gentle and steady. She reached for a small wooden chest, its surface worn smooth by years of careful use, and opened it to reveal her most treasured socks. Some had been given as gifts long ago, their colors faded to gentle pastels, while others were new, knitted by loving granddaughters or friends from the village. Each pair held a story, of winter nights spent spinning, of laughter and conversation, of hands working together across generations. The woman inspected her favorite pair first, running her fingers along the seams to check for thinness or tears. With quiet focus, she took up a needle and some bright yarn, patiently weaving small, neat stitches wherever the wool had grown weak. Her care was as much about preserving warmth as it was about honoring the memories each sock carried. When her repairs were done, the old woman smoothed the socks and folded them with practiced hands, laying each pair neatly back into the chest. She smiled softly, thinking of the feet these socks had kept warm, her husband in years past, children now gone and grown, and her own as she moved slowly around her home. On cold mornings, or when her aches grew sharper, these socks offered not only protection, but comfort, a gentle weight and familiar texture that soothed body and spirit alike. Sometimes she would share advice with younger neighbors or teach a child to mend a hole, passing on the small rituals that had shaped her days. Above all, her care showed a quiet gratitude for the simple things that lasted: a fire's glow, the company of family, and the enduring pleasure of well-loved socks. In those peaceful hours, surrounded by the gentle order of her tasks, she found a kind of quiet happiness, warmed by memories and the quiet promise of another day. In the heart of every family, there were stories that went unspoken, woven quietly into the most ordinary objects. Among these, socks held a special place, passed from hand to hand. Each pair carried the memory of seasons long gone. A mother folded socks with extra care, thinking of her own childhood when her mother did the same. Often, a pair of thick woolen socks, mended many times over, would find its way into a daughter's wedding chest, or become a comfort for a grandchild sleeping by the hearth. There was never a need for grand words. The gentle wear on the heels and toes spoke of long days in fields or markets, of laughter shared at family tables, of goodbyes and homecomings by candlelight. Each stitch and patch, whether expertly crafted or clumsily added by small fingers, marked a chapter in the story of togetherness, an inheritance carried not in riches, but in warmth. These socks became symbols of care, tradition, and the enduring bond of family. When cold winds rattled the shutters or illness kept someone in bed, the much-mended socks would be fetched from the deepest drawer. Elders would share a quiet smile, remembering when those same socks had warmed their own feet in younger days. Sometimes, children would listen in wonder as a parent described who had worn a certain pair for their first winter, or when a certain color was chosen for a special festival. In this gentle passing down of simple things, each generation became guardian of small comforts and patient lessons. The socks, softened over time by use and love, quietly reminded everyone that family life was built on 1,000 tiny acts, threaded together through seasons, years, and the steady hope that warmth and care would always find a way from heart to heart. After a long walk through wet fields or home from an errand beneath a steady rain, socks often returned soaked and heavy with water. The feeling of pulling off wet socks was both uncomfortable and familiar, a reminder of how quickly weather could seep through boots and chill the skin. Wool clung to the ankles, coarse and cold, weighing down each step before finally being peeled away at the cottage door. Drops would fall to the packed earth floor, and the fabric, once soft and giving, now felt rough and clammy, its bright colors muted and darkened by the damp. The chill crept into toes and heels, making every movement slow and careful until the comfort of warmth could be found. For children, the squish of wet socks sometimes brought giggles or gentle complaints, but for adults, there was always swift relief in the promise of a dry pair waiting nearby. The true comfort, however, came in the simple act of drying socks beside the fire. Each pair was carefully hung over a wooden rack or laid upon warm stones near the glowing embers, steam rising as the last of the rain vanished into the air. Slowly, the wool softened again, its natural oils rising to the surface, bringing back some of that familiar, earthy scent. Watching socks dry was its own kind of pleasure, a gentle reward for enduring the damp, a patient ritual that brought the family together around warmth and light. As the socks once more became dry and pliable, ready to be pulled on again, they seemed to promise renewed comfort, a barrier once more against the cold. Small hands eagerly reached for freshly dried pairs, the softness and gentle heat, a perfect welcome after the chill of the outdoors. In these moments, beside the steady fire and surrounded by the muffled sounds of rain, families found coziness and reassurance woven not only into the fabric of their socks, but into the familiar routine that followed every damp return home. As dusk crept softly into the village, homes glowed with gentle lamplight and the inviting warmth of the hearth. In this tranquil hour, family members gathered on woven rush mats or woolen rugs, spread across cool stone floors. Removing one's socks was a small but cherished ritual at the end of a long day. Each person took care to set their socks neatly beside them, showing respect for the craft that had kept their feet warm and dry through chores, lessons, or travel. Bare feet pressed into soft threads or the smooth textures of well-trodden mats, letting go of the day's fatigue. The feeling was a quiet luxury, the steady support of handmade flooring beneath toes and the relief of coolness rising through soles, a gentle counterbalance to the earlier embrace of thick, comforting socks. The rugs and carpets themselves held their own stories, woven patiently by skilled hands from reeds, wool, or scraps of fabric. These surfaces offered not only a gentle cushion, but a sense of home and belonging, reminding all who rested there of care passed through generations. Children, free from shoes and socks, played at the edges while elders rested in chairs or near the fire, enjoying the hush that fell as evening deepened. As socks and boots were set aside, the simple beauty of bare feet on a familiar rug signaled a time for reflection, family tales, and the slow unwinding of the day. With every step onto these carefully maintained surfaces, villagers honored the quiet craftsmanship that made daily life softer and more welcoming. In this respectful pause, comfort was not just felt, but seen and remembered, in the textures underfoot, in the socks at rest, and in the peaceful togetherness that filled each humble room. The story of a humble pair of socks began long before they warmed anyone's feet. On a quiet morning, wool was sheared from patient sheep grazing on village hillsides, the fibers gathered with mindful hands and washed clean in cold, flowing water. Sitting in the shade, a spinner turned the raw wool into soft, sturdy yarn, her spindle whirling in a gentle, steady rhythm. The scent of fresh fleece and open fields hung in the air as the yarn was carefully sorted and dyed with colors made from wildflowers or roots. Next, an artisan or family member wove or knitted the threads, row after row, until a simple, foot-shaped form emerged. During the slower hours of the day, when children finished chores and elders shared stories, stitches were checked and tiny flaws mended, each step a quiet act of care. From sheep to yarn to stitch, the socks gathered the spirit of the land, the weather, and the patient touch of hands through the passing days. When finally finished, the socks found their place in a family's home, tucked neatly on a shelf, or hung by the hearth to dry in the evening glow. The act of putting them on each new day became a gentle ritual. Feet slid in, embraced by the soft, familiar fabric, comfort radiating upward with every step. The socks carried their own memories into daily life, the chill of dawn beneath stone floors, the peaceful hush of winter evenings, or the muffled excitement of market days. Through mud, rain, chores, rest, and laughter, they traveled along paths and hallways, hidden in boots or drying by the fire. With every wash and repair, the socks grew softer, becoming a trusted companion for the feet they served. Quietly, in the background of ordinary days, these simple socks lived out their journey in countless ways, always sturdy, always comforting, and always stitched with the enduring care of home. In the gentle quiet of daily life, most socks worn by villagers were built for work, crafted from sturdy wool or linen, always practical and often plain. These socks faced the hardest tasks. They cushioned feet through hours in muddy fields and cool barns, absorbed the sweat of honest labor, and shielded skin from rough shoes or the biting chill of early mornings. The colors were simple, most dyed in shades that hid stains, and the stitches were firm and serviceable. Many showed signs of patching, a badge of their resilience, and the care spent keeping them useful for as long as possible. Their comfort lay in their dependability, drawn on before chores, replaced and washed when needed, then hung by the fire, ready for another day's work. These socks asked nothing more than to be worn and mended, a silent partner in the flow of ordinary life. For special gatherings and feasts, however, a different kind of sock waited in the bottom of a chest, or wrapped in cloth for safekeeping. These pairs were saved for rare moments, festival days, weddings, or visits to the church, and when taken out, their subtle differences shone in the firelight. Festive socks might hold a brighter color, or a delicate embroidered line, perhaps a pattern of leaves or a family symbol stitched at the cuff. Finer threads were sometimes used, softening the fabric against the skin, and careful finishing at the toes and edges gave them a feeling of quiet pride. They were unscuffed by hard work, only ever slipped onto clean feet after a careful wash, their main task to add a touch of celebration and quiet dignity. When the day was done, these socks would be shaken out and stored away again, preserved for the next moment of joy. In these small distinctions, villagers honored both the rhythm of their work and the beauty of life's special occasions, finding comfort and meaning in even the most subtle change of fabric and thread. In the calm, steady pace of medieval life, socks mirrored the world around them in their quiet simplicity. Nothing in the village moved quickly. Fields grew in their own time, bread rose slowly by the fire, and days were measured more by the sun and weather than by rushing clocks. The making of socks fits seamlessly into this rhythm. Each pair was crafted with patience, wool spun by thoughtful hands, yarn dyed in water gently heated over the hearth, stitches made one by one in the evening's soft light. There was no hurry, just careful motions repeated across generations, and a sense of peace found in the ordinary act of creating something useful. When socks were finished, their shape and color were never showy or elaborate. Instead, they reflected an honest beauty, a softness against the rough of stone, a gentle shield from cold, and a quiet affirmation that comfort was born from care and steady work. This simplicity extended to everyday routines, where socks played their small but meaningful role. Pulled on at dawn before chores, or kept dry by the fire for colder nights, they invited the wearer to take things slowly and appreciate the comfort of the present moment. The plain design, the mended heel, and the practical stretch across the foot all spoke of a life that valued usefulness and patience over constant change. Throughout the seasons, socks were washed, dried, repaired, and worn again, each cycle as unhurried as the movement of clouds or the shifting of seasons. In their humble way, socks taught a lesson about living gently and well. That richness was found not in owning many things, but in cherishing what was made by hand and tended with care. As villagers walked through meadows or gathered near the fire, their simple socks carried them through quiet days. Small, constant companions in a world where slow comfort and peaceful rhythms were treasures of their own. As the days lengthened and the first warmth of spring crept into stone cottages, families turned to the gentle ritual of putting away winter socks. The thicker, coarser pairs, ones that had served so well through months of snow and damp, were carefully collected in baskets near the hearth. Each sock was checked by thoughtful hands, stretched and aired, then mended if any seams had loosened or heels had thinned. Children watched as mothers patched small holes and fathers shook out bits of dried grass or straw. Washing was a quiet affair by the riverbank, or, well, the cool water running through each pair, carrying away the last traces of winter mud. At home, the socks were dried in weak sunlight and soft breezes, then folded and arranged with patience, their earthy colors stacked in small towers that leaned gently against wooden chests or shelves carved long ago. Storing away socks for the coming months was more than a tidy habit. It was a way of honoring the quiet effort that went into them. Pairs were wrapped in bits of spare cloth or tucked with sprigs of lavender to keep them fresh. The smallest hands sometimes asked to help carry bundles to the family's storage trunk. There, the socks would rest through the warm months, waiting for the first crisp day to return. This slow, attentive care was filled with gratitude for the protection offered, for the work shared in their making and mending, for the warmth gently stored away until needed again. The ritual was calming and unhurried, a pause in the swirl of farm chores and garden planting, and a reminder of the cycles that shaped life in the village. And so, as robins sang in the hedgerows and fields softened under new grass, the thick socks slept quietly, held in trust, until the world called for their comfort once more. On a crisp autumn afternoon, the air carried the soft scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Orange and gold littered the narrow village paths, creating a gentle carpet underfoot. Out for errands or returning from chores, villagers moved slowly beneath trees, their steps barely louder than a breath. Feet wrapped in sturdy, hand-knit socks pressed through the dry leaves, making a quiet, steady whisper with every stride. The thick wool cushioned toes from the cool earth below, while the familiar sound of leaves shifting and giving way painted each step with comfort. Children raced ahead, giggling as their feet rustled up small flurries, while elders walked at a peaceful pace, savoring the soft rhythm of the season. In that shared melody, the world felt calm and close, The gentle hush, speaking of change, but never hurry. These moments highlighted the strength and care woven into every pair of socks. Some were faded by many seasons, patched at the heel but still reliable. Others newly crafted and extra thick for the coming cold. Thick yarn hugged feet snugly, keeping them dry and warm despite the cool breeze playing through open fields. Villagers trusted these socks, knowing each was made to last through many walks across shifting ground and the passing of gentle rains. The softness buffered every step from the roughness of twigs or uneven stones, turning the ordinary act of walking into something faintly magical. As footsteps continued down village lanes and through distant woods, the sound of leaves crunching under sturdy socks became a quiet hymn to the care that wound its way through daily life, a reminder that even the smallest comforts could turn simple moments into lasting peace. A quiet morning in the village workshop began with the gentle clatter of tools and the soft voices of learning. At a sturdy table cluttered with skeins of wool and spindles, a young apprentice leaned in close beside his master, his eyes full of focus and curiosity. The older man, hands skilled from years of practice, began each lesson slowly, demonstrating how to draw thread from a bundle of wool, how to spin it evenly, and how to knot the end with a steady touch. He spoke in calm tones, sharing not just the steps, but the purpose beneath each gesture. The apprentice followed along, fingers uncertain at first, but steadied by patient guidance. With every attempt, his movements grew more confident, the rhythm of spinning and winding sinking into muscle and memory. Together they watched the fibers twist and gather, the old master's praise quiet but sincere, each word building trust between teacher and student. The work moved forward, now shifting to needles and careful rows. The master demonstrated how to cast stitches onto wood, how to guide the yarn with even pressure, creating rows that would soon grow into something useful. The apprentice mimicked each motion as best he could, tongue pressed to his teeth in concentration, the simple pleasure of honest work glowing within. When a stitch slipped, or a seam threatened to unravel, the older man simply smiled, showing how to fix the trouble with patience rather than haste. Time drifted by unnoticed as their hands moved together, the world narrowing to wool, needles, and quiet laughter. Slowly, the apprentice's first sock began to take shape, a little lopsided, but warm and strong. In this patient, careful partnership, not only was skill passed on, but a sense of belonging and pride, a gentle inheritance embodied in every finished stitch, ready to keep another pair of feet warm through seasons yet to come. The tools used to mend socks in medieval homes were few, humble, and deeply treasured. In most cottages, a small wooden box or leather pouch held the essentials, a set of bone or brass needles, each one carefully cleaned and smoothed over years of use. There was always a ball of leftover yarn, spun thick or thin from previous projects, its colors never quite matching but perfect for strong repairs. At the heart of the mending was the darning egg, a simple egg-shaped stone or carved piece of wood, polished by many hands. When a hole appeared at the toe or heel, the damaged sock was slipped onto this rounded form, stretching the fabric just enough to see the edges clearly and provide a solid base for the repair. For some families, a well-shaped stone found in the fields became a beloved tool, passed down with quiet pride and gentle care. The act of mending began with threading the needle, often with yarn thicker than the original sock so that the repair would last. With the foot of the sock wrapped smooth and tight over the darning egg, the mender's hands worked patiently, weaving the needle in and out to create a tiny bridge across the hole. Rows of new thread crossed in gentle grids, bringing the torn edges together and building back lost warmth. Sometimes the stitches were neat and even. Sometimes they revealed the hurried help of young hands still learning the careful craft. Alongside the egg and the needle, a pair of small iron scissors finished the job, snipping stray ends and trimming any loose threads. When the work was done, the sock was removed from the egg, the patch strong and just a little brighter than the rest. These simple tools, unremarkable on their own, together turned holes into stories, and kept favorite socks journeying through many more seasons of quiet, dependable comfort. As evenings settled over the village, a gentle quiet fell inside the sockmaker's workshop. Throughout the day, hands had spun, dyed, and woven, and now the bustling energy faded into a peaceful hush. The space was filled with a tapestry of scents, each carrying its own story. The warm, earthy aroma of lanolin still clung to the air, drifting from baskets of freshly spun wool stacked at the edge of the work table. Alongside this lingered the sweet, grassy trace of dried flax, a memory from last summer's harvest. Strewn across benches lay pieces of wool, some still damp from morning's dye pots, carrying subtle hints of nettle, marigold, or walnut husk. These plant dyes left gentle ghosts of their smell, blending with the air as though the workshop itself remembered the meadows and streams from which its colors came. Each breath brought the comfort of the land indoors, grounding the quiet room with a sense of home. Other fragrances rose more softly as twilight deepened. The woody, familiar scent of the work table mingled with beeswax, rubbed into needles and scissors for smooth working. A faint, smoky note drifted from the fireplace, where scraps of yarn and bits of spent thread rested in a small pile destined to feed the evening's fire. Now and then the sweet aroma of bread or stew from a nearby cottage joined the air, seeping through cracks in the shutters, firming the connection between labor and rest. In these moments, the workshop felt wrapped in its own warmth, calm, a little cluttered, alive with all the quiet hum of day's end. The fragrances folded together as the last piece of wool was set aside and the tools were stacked for tomorrow, offering a simple, soothing reminder that every sense could find peace and belonging through the honest work of hands and heart. In the slow, gentle rhythm of a quiet village, the comfort of socks mattered most to those who had traveled many seasons. For the elders, whose steps grew slower and whose bones felt each change in the weather, the simple pleasure of pulling on a well-made pair of socks each morning was a small blessing. These socks were often thicker, softer, and lovingly mended over the years, a product of careful attention and the hands of family or friends. With each thread and patch, they shielded tired feet from the cold stone floor or the sudden draft creeping under doors. Sitting by the window or near the hearth, the elderly found quiet warmth and relief in the gentle embrace of their socks. Even the act of donning them, rolling the fabric over careful ankles, became a ritual both calming and reassuring, reminding them of the patient care given to their well-being. As each day unfolded, the value of these humble socks only deepened. Whether watching dawn break through frosted glass or lingering late into peaceful evenings, elders could move confidently across rooms, their feet cushioned from the world's hardness. On colder days, when joints ached and wind-rattled wooden shutters, thick socks became a shield against discomfort and a silent testament to the wisdom of slow living. Grandchildren might curl up at their feet or listen to softly told stories, learning the quiet art of keeping warm in simple, mindful ways. In nights spent by candlelight and mornings when the first fire was lit, the presence of good socks meant dignity and security, a comfort as faithful as the village's slow, reassuring pace. With each fresh pair, gently folded and set aside for tomorrow, the elders of the village felt connected to care, tradition, and the silent grace that comes from being remembered and cherished. As the sun dipped low, painting the horizon in warm strokes of gold and rose, the village workshop grew quiet. Inside, the craftsman paused his labors, laying aside his tools with the ease of someone who knew the value of slow work and quiet rest. On a wooden bench by the open window, he arranged the socks he'd finished that day in a careful row, some striped, some patched, all shaped lovingly by his hands. The last light of day brushed over the wool, picking up flecks of color from natural dyes and highlighting the gentle curve of each toe and cuff. The craftsman leaned forward, elbows on the sill, letting his shoulders unwind as he watched the peaceful world outside. Village roofs nestled into the folds of green hills, smoke curling upward in ribbons. Fields faded into cool shadows, while birds flashed, silent across the sky. In these soft moments, the craftsman breathed in the dusky air, filled with the faint scent of wool, wood, and distant earth. He let his gaze rest on the small stack of socks, each one a quiet story of sheep and spindle, color, and thoughtful labor. Sometimes he remembered the faces of neighbors, friends, or children who would wear these socks in days to come. Quiet gratitude, laughter, or relief, echoing softly through memory. The world outside settled into evening's hush, and the craftsman's heart matched its slow, gentle beat. With a steady hand, he arranged the last pair one final time, feeling that sense of deep contentment that follows honest work. The socks would be shared, gifted, or bartered tomorrow, but tonight they were simply a sign of care, of skill, and of the peace that comes at the close of a well-spent day. The workshop, touched by sunset and shadow, grew still, ready to begin again with the coming light. As days and seasons passed slowly through medieval villages, the making of socks became part of a larger story, a living tradition woven quietly through generations. Grandparents taught children to spin and dye, to knit or weave with patient hands, always sharing the gentle rituals that linked one life to another. Socks might begin as fleece from a familiar hill, but with every twist, stitch, and patch, they carried more than just warmth. They held the memory of strong arms shearing sheep, the laughter of neighbors at the dye pot, the hush of evening when wool was spun by firelight. These simple skills formed a fabric of knowledge passed down not through grand records or royal decree, but through the steady rhythm of everyday life. In every pair of socks there was a little of the land, the weather, and the gentle wisdom of those who came before. This quiet perseverance gave the village strength and unity, allowing families to feel connected not just to the past, but to each other. Even as fashions shifted or times brought change, the humble sock remained a small daily comfort and living proof of tradition's power. Each patch added by a careful hand, each color drawn from a neighbor's garden, reflected a promise that what mattered most was shared, not lost. Over years and centuries, the simple act of making and mending socks tied together hearts and homes, keeping the spirit of old crafts alive. So it was that every villager, young or old, found a gentle pride in slipping on a pair of socks shaped by familiar hands, knowing they walked onward, wrapped in the enduring warmth of ancient care and quiet tradition, with a little piece of history accompanying them step by gentle step. As evening settled quietly over the village, candles flickered in windows, and the gentle hush of night spread across the fields. In every home, socks waited by the hearth, lined up or draped across wooden benches, unremarkable at first glance, yet essential to the comfort of each family. The simple act of pulling on a warm pair after a day's work, or feeling soft wool cradle tired feet by firelight, added a touch of peace to even the most ordinary routines. Socks moved silently with their owners through chores, conversation, and rest, offering a steadiness that shaped the rhythm of life. In a world where comfort was hard-won and each belonging was cherished, socks became small symbols of care, evidence that gentle patience and honest labor could wrap each member of the village in quiet security. Through all the turning seasons, socks asked for little and offered much. They connected neighbors and marketplace trades, carried hope and memory as gifts, and kept story and skill alive across generations. Whether plain and mended from years of use, or richly embroidered for a special feast, socks brought calm to busy mornings, shelter to stormy days, and warmth to silent nights. In the soft folds and careful stitches, the peace of medieval living was made real, resting in the knowledge that comfort often lived in the simplest things. And as the world slowed down at sunset, every pair reflected the heart of humble life in the village, gentle, enduring, and peacefully at home, step after steady step.